Hello and welcome to episode 69 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is the Ocampan farmer turned galactic freedom fighter, Markhawkman.
Mitchell, at least on this character. Maybe.
My mistake. And the Kazon ambassador to the Federation, Greendragoon.
It was the only way to get away around being assimilated by the Borg.
And our guest tonight is founder, author, and community leader, Castmodean.
Wait, I'm a leader?
Sure.
We just
Better
didn't tell you.
Better than being a follower. Right?
Doom!
He's our leader in Doom, anyway. So the first thing I have to do is start out with a little bit of an apology. Right after the dev panel at Star Trek Las Vegas, I actually filmed several fellow Foundry authors, including Castmodean here, having a small discussion about what we heard. However, when I went back to look at it, when I finally got home, the audio turned out to be really, really bad, and I mean, it wasn't even worth messing with. So that's why I wanted to make sure I had at least one of my fellow STLV guys with me here to... so we could actually go ahead and talk about what we saw, what we heard, and the con in general. But before we get to anything STLV related, we have Foundry news. First off, while we were off the air, indeed while many of us were at STLV, Cryptic put in a fix for the Foundry Lag. And by all accounts, it has worked.
Yay.
Everything's back to normal, obviously, until it inevitably breaks with Delta Rising.
You never know. This might be the update that doesn't break the Foundry.
What is it they say is the
when I see
definition
it.
of insanity?
When you're not willing to accept that it's insane?
I think he's referring to doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result.
Yes.
Well, this isn't technically the same thing. It's a series of several extremely similar things. Not exactly the same.
Pretty close.
It's got a point, though. I mean, every code is different, so I mean, you never know.
Every update breaks the Foundry. That's just the reality that we live in.
But it's a good point and notice to for authors when the new expansion hits Tribble to get on Tribble and test. A while back,
because we did catch some of these things that were, the Foundry breaking. We did find them on Tribble, and probably didn't report them enough to make them see them as important.
I don't know. I like to think that our communication with the devs has gotten better over time.
I think I remember someone mentioning that the Foundry was going slow on Tribble and then dismissing it as being like, oh, well, Tribble's slow anyways. And then it gets on live and it's like, oh, wait.
That particular one I don't remember from Tribble, but the one that I remember is the whiteness bug, where all of the objects were turning white.
That was annoying.
Yeah, that one actually was found on Tribble, but it was bug reported, but they didn't fix it then.
And then we recently got a variant of that's actually worse than the whiteness. Oh well.
What are we talking about? The missing objects? That's kind of recently.
Yeah, the one where you can't see anything.
Well, I should point out that actually only, so far as I can tell, extend to a few objects. Now they are some common objects such as like walls and doors and some things like that. A few consoles, but I don't. It's certainly not everything.
But still, it's an issue, and it's something that Cryptic Frost says he is looking into.
Yeah,
but we haven't had an update on that in a little while.
And there is a thread on the forums, and if you have additional observations that you would like to contribute to that, you can find it there.
I'm sure posting specific objects would certainly help.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, especially if they can help them narrow down what's causing this.
Also, be as specific as possible, and give the devs the exact names of every single object you've seen do this. It doesn't matter if it takes like 7 pages to list them all. Do it anyway. It helps.
Well, be precise is a good piece of advice for writing bug reports.
And we're Foundry authors, so we're nothing if not obsessive compulsive.
detail-oriented is the way I like to describe that. It's a nice way of putting it. But we have even better news. Zeronius Rex has gone through a round of adding costumes to the Foundry. Which costumes, you ask? Well, darn near everyone.
I have here in my notes written all the things.
Do you want to read it?
No, I wrote all the things.
You wrote all the things. So let's see. I thought there would be too many lists here, but highlights include the Romulan Republic uniforms, Bajoran uniforms, all of the stuff from the Lobi store, reputation armors, and especially including some of the reputation armor variants that are not accessible to players in the main game. Very cool. It's not that much of a secret. Now, I don't want to claim that my poll had any connection to this, but just about everything that was on it has been added, and even some stuff that wasn't on it was added. So that poll is pretty much useless now, for sure. Even some of the very, very minor things that I know people had wanted, like TOS combat, not symbols, not comm badges, because they weren't comm badges at the time, but the chest symbols are there that weren't there before. So, I mean, it's just an absolute metric ton of stuff.
She was incredibly thorough, and she deserves my applause.
I just suddenly remembered something. It's not something that's actually... You know what? Never mind. Technically, that would count as a new asset request and not a costume import to the Foundry. So, I was thinking about that,
how
right?
I feel about making requests when someone has just done something nice for you.
I know.
That goes to all of you out there. Not that I'm completely immune to it either. There are a couple of bugs, or there were anyway. The mobile emitter was on the list, but not in game. We were told it had to be removed last minute. And we will hope for that one to return. The other thing that was in the notes on Tribble, but was missing, were the EV suits. Zero said on Twitter that she would investigate, but she hasn't gotten back to us on that. And it does not appear in the patch notes for Holodeck that is going live on Thursday. So hopefully we get those eventually.
I should point out that Zeronius Rex is not a character artist. She is actually a producer who took the time to learn how to add costumes and assets to the Foundry just so that she could add costumes and assets for us.
Sir Boulevard points out that one of the things that didn't make it in this time was the KDF and Fed ally uniforms for Romulans. And I think... and I don't know if this was an official discussion with anyone official, but I think somebody figured out it was because those are so tied to that ally system, and because the characters that we create in the costume creator aren't allied. They're just base Romulans.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling about that one.
Like sub-level 11 Romulans. So that may be the issue there.
The plus side, though, is we did also get Tal Shiar uniforms and Romulan 22nd century uniforms.
I'm very excited about that because, of course, I have my Battle of Clock to Kill Bracht.
Has anyone tested the extent of the Tal Shiar uniforms in the Foundry? Because one thing I remember that has annoyed people on live is that the playable Tal Shiar uniforms have missing pieces, and the male and female versions have different missing pieces.
I couldn't tell you.
I think somebody did, and I think they were exactly the same things as the playable ones, like they were missing those options. So it's something that is a bug in game that has migrated to the Foundry because of because of the system of adding them. Just added straight away exactly what was in the game. But still, it's much better than what we had access to before. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the coming weeks going through my missions and figuring out, okay, what of these new costumes can I use? And what do I want to update? I know I've got a scene in the Romulan Senate, and I now have Romulan senatorial robes, the ones from the embassy, that I can put these guys in, the senators. So that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was just playing around in Tribble and just having so much fun playing around. And the fun thing is with the Foundry is occasionally the costume editor there can be slightly less restrictive than the one we have because it kind of treats things in separate sections. So I was kind of combining the helmet with from the counter command armor with the chest and legs from the Undyne armor, and just kind of having fun playing around with those and getting them to work.
Yeah, you can definitely mix and match a lot of things that you can't do in the game.
I just don't know what I'm going to do with myself now. I've been complaining about some of this stuff since March of 2011, and it's all in there now.
Oof.
Doom.
I was going to say, dare I say it, not Doom?
They're adding things to the game. Of course, Doom. But definitely, I think it's an excellent addition. A few of the newer things are not in this update, like this year's Rise of Swimwear and the Zindi outfits from the Lobi store. But I think for me, at least, that doesn't dampen my enthusiasm in any way. Because in one fell swoop, she's added like 90% of the missing costumes. And I mean, these are things that, as you point out, were missing for years and years. And couple this with the constant ship updates we get. And Tumor Boy says that he's working on a new batch of asset imports. And gentlemen, this is a great time for the Foundry.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be high up on the more... although I'm kind of going to wonder, because I mean, just with all the sheer number of updates, I wonder if even someone in management isn't kind of pushing under the table to get us a few more easy-to-get updates.
Well, and to be fair, we're only getting cosmetic updates, not structural updates. But to be honest, it's been more the cosmetic updates that we've been asking for ages. I mean, we worked out the workarounds for a lot of stuff, so we can do more with more less.
Well, you say we, but as we pointed out before, the Foundry community doesn't, always speak with one voice. We don't always think the same things. And I know there's a lot of people who really want those structural updates and really want things like the Nudger and things like that. I'm not one of them. I want these cosmetic updates. I want all the costumes. I want more assets. I want more maps. I don't need the...
Well, I consider it
personally.
I consider it a stopgap. It's something that's been needed to be done since the implementation of most of the stuff. And yes, we do need them to evaluate some of the nifty keen things, like the teleporter is probably the one that I would love the most to see put in, so that we could actually use one map for multiple scenes. But I mean, I am content with what we have right now, because it's more than we had 2 years ago.
No, yeah, I mean, obviously we're not getting seeing much in the way of programmer time, but at the same time, it's clearly clear that we're getting a lot of love here, and
Absolutely.
I'm not going to poo-poo that.
Now, also in this update, which is going live tomorrow, we do have those patch notes. They have added a new tag to the review system. This tag is called Quarters, and this is specifically meant to facilitate the player housing project. The theory being that you build a map that you want to be like, a house. I'm using house in quotes here, or basically an RP map. So it can be tagged as quarters and therefore be a little bit separate from regular missions. I kind of have my doubts about this because I don't think the tagging system really works properly, and I suspect, although I can't know for sure, that very few people actually use it to search for missions. But maybe this will actually encourage people to do that. People who are actively looking for RP maps, if we get the word out, they'll know to search for quarters, and hopefully that will work properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I've kind of said in the past that I'm not 100% sure how the tagging system is supposed to work, so I can never really tell if it's doing what it was designed to do.
Well, I know the exclude doesn't work, but I can't speak for the rest of it.
Sort of, kind of, maybe sometimes works.
Yeah, sort of, kind of, maybe sometimes. That's a pretty good description for it. But I know a lot of people are very excited about it. We had a gentleman come back to the community who hasn't been seen in many years. Dave J99 came back, and he's very excited. He's building a RP map.
Well, after tomorrow, I should be even more excited.
Yeah, because we can actually start tagging it. Now, I still wish that this was something that it would let authors themselves tag their mission as instead of reviewers. But that's another fight.
Yeah.
Last piece of Foundry news. We did have the winner declared in the Foundry Challenge number 9. That winner is Mirror Nova by A. Falconer. So congratulations to him. There was a live stream last weekend where Captain Smirk announced the winner and I believe played the mission. Is that correct?
Yep, it was very nice.
I didn't actually see it. So we'll have to speculate what the next challenge will be. Maybe exploration? I don't know.
Well, that'd certainly be a nice option given the circumstances.
Yeah, and given the more recent push they seem to be doing to make Foundry the new exploration, it makes sense.
And Kirkvat, with his couple of exploration missions, has said it has been getting a lot of reviews on them, and good reviews too, positive ones. And so he was saying, he really thinks that there's a market for these missions, fairly short and good exploration missions to go with those clusters. So a challenge would encourage people to do more of those, get a good library going.
Actually, speaking of promotion and market, Smirk has put out the word he is in desperate need of KDF spotlight submissions. He wants to keep the KDF to Fed ratio the same, but he is running out of viable spotlights. So, I mean, I know everybody doesn't like to develop for KDF because it's a smaller player base, but seriously, I mean, your chances of getting a KDF spotlight are way better than getting a Fed one.
That's true.
Well, I have a mission that I'm planning to tinker with and then toss it into the bin for consideration.
So I promised him
that's part of the issue is that he needs you to hit that submit button.
Yeah, you can't just take recommendations. He needs the mission to actually be submitted.
Yeah, we need both actually. So I took a look through Kirkfat's list of great missions, and there are quite a number of missions on there that are not spotlighted for the KDF. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to start contacting some of those authors and see if they are still around in the community if they want to submit theirs. Otherwise, we want to just put that out there to everybody. If you have a KDF mission or if you know one that you really like, submit it for spotlighting. Tell Smirk that you have submitted it, or try and get in touch with the author and get them to do so. Now, the other thing I thought of in conjunction with this is to maybe try and do some kind of, KDF Foundry Month, because I'm sure there's a lot of great KDF missions out there that aren't getting the plays because, there is a lower population over there. And the KDF mission list is a complete mess. It's so clogged with loot grinders that you can't hardly find anything. And I think KDF authors need our help. They need a leg up. So we should take a month and promote them. We'll get, any podcast we can possibly get on board with this to, do review KDF missions or plug it. Put the list of great KDF missions out there, spotlights and non-spotlights, any ones we can find. Put the list out there so that people who don't frequent the Foundry forums know about this list. They know about these missions, and maybe even make some new ones to release in conjunction with that month. Now, this is going to take a fair amount of planning. I haven't figured out what month we could do this in. I'm thinking after Legacy Romulus, after everything settles down, would be the best time. So I don't know, maybe December or January or something like that. We could have a Klingon Christmas.
Doesn't that involve like 100 roast hog and 60 barrels of blood wine or something?
And pain sticks, I assume.
Gotta have pain sticks.
Yeah.
And also that thing with the knife where they cut their palms.
Oh, you always have to have that. Like before dinner,
Well-
after dinner.
Well, there's also the Klingon version of arm wrestling.
Yeah,
You remember that one?
I do remember that one. That's why I'm glad I'm not an actual Klingon.
Headbutt.
Yeah.
Yes. Although I can do the headbutts because I'm, obviously crash helmet. Very much helps with that. So let's move along to let's talk about Star Trek Las Vegas. Castmodean and I both went to that. Also with us were Zorbane, Bazag, RogueEnterprise, Captain PF Dennis, and Kirk Fat. Did I miss
Also
something?
lurking at Star Trek Las Vegas was the diabolical Tacophanes, but he's technically not a Foundry author.
There were any number of Stowe players there, besides just us.
Oh yeah, I mean the Moorblade was there. Of course, who knows how much a Caspian. There were a lot of people dressed up there.
Yeah, we saw a number of Star Trek Online uniforms, the old Sierra uniforms.
Yeah, just as everybody
Some-
gets their
some of which-
costume
yeah.
ready, they update the uniform code.
Although I've now seen pictures from another con of people that looked like they had the Odyssey dress uniforms. Maybe they made them themselves. I don't know.
Nice.
Or it was just something similar.
And allegedly on the internet, there is available the Ryzen dance video of Sierra Uniform Doom.
This I have actually seen. I believe Captain Gecko himself posted it.
Well,
Because I think he was the cameraman with his phone. But yeah, that was part of the Meet the Devs event on Saturday night at the iBar, which is really a terrible venue for that, I must say. Talking just amongst ourselves than to actual devs, but we were able to corner Thomas the Cat for a little bit and talk to him about the mission search user interface. Basically, the gist of A, we need a next button, and B, it needs a whole revamp. So we were able to get that point across to him. He said he was pretty much on our side, but hedged that obviously he doesn't make those kinds of decisions. So
Yeah, but when
a
he's
lot of
into
what he works
something,
on
he
is-
can
he has
become a voice.
So at least we were able to talk to people about that.
So I wasn't there, but I did watch like every video or live stream I could get my browser onto.
How were the
Um,
live streams this year?
The ones for the booth were fine. The one from the actual panel kind of copped out halfway through. Apparently, Elijah from Priority One was doing it on his phone, and his phone ran out of battery or something.
Ouch.
So after that, it was kind of your tweets that kind of kept me up.
Yeah, I was live tweeting through the whole dev panel, trying to do it as fast as I possibly could. And little known to me at the time, but Ash Crick, our fellow Foundry author, was reposting all of that in the general forums, which is fine, which of course caused a massive, massive thread, which I find quite amusing. But
Let me guess, Tier 6 ships.
yeah, the Tier 6 ships was definitely one of the biggest reveals there and one of the most controversial, and remains so, because We really don't have a lot of details on that. We know
Yeah.
something like 7 to 10 ships are coming with the initial release, and then I assume they'll probably release some more as we go on.
Yeah, those ships take
Oh.
time, and
Oh yeah,
Mm.
I think
Uh,
Castmodean's call dropped. Have we got him back?
I am back
You're
now,
back.
maybe.
Okay.
You may or may not have noticed, but Taco Fangs put up a bunch of pictures on his Flickr photo stream.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
yeah. Really great pictures, even much better than mine. And he had much better seats for the panels than I did, that's for sure. I should say that a lot of us are planning to go back in 2016, and so anybody who sees this and hears this, 2016 is our year. Plan for it. Let's all be there.
yeah, I mean, I'm planning to be
this
there.
This one was so much fun. I had a blast. It was great having so many Foundry authors there. It was great meeting all my friends that I've known for years, actually meeting them in real life. And let's make 2016 even bigger because it's the 50th anniversary of Star Trek.
And with extra time to plan, I might have to go for one of those gold packages because I imagine it's going to be packed.
That is kind of what I'm thinking of because it gets you better seats, for one.
Yeah. So can we convince you to go, Mark?
Well, I have, I guess you'd say, budgetary limitation there, but
You got 2
I'd
years.
like
You got 2 years to save up.
yeah, we'll see.
All you have to do is
honestly,
donate.
I spent a lot less than I thought I would. So
And there are ways to save on some of the expenses.
like going out to the In-N-Out Burger, which is very cheap.
Yes, not
But a
eating
good
at the
burger.
venue.
That's good advice, yeah. And like going over to the Gold Coast next door to the Rio and going to the Subway, which is much cheaper than most of the food there, even though it's
Well,
slightly more expensive than your average
It,
Subway.
it sounds like the convention food is like airport food, where they charge double just because.
Well, okay.
'Cause they
We should put the caveat on here. Their food is hideously expensive. You have no way to take it with you, but it is large quantities and absurdly good.
Well, I was able to take half a sandwich back to my room one time.
Well, okay.
So I got 2 meals out of that.
The sports bar is one thing.
Yeah, that was the deli, but I'm sure the buffet they don't let you take anything out of that.
Yeah, the buffet, no, and also the Hash House of Doom.
That was crazy. I'm sure probably a lot of you have seen Bazag's tweets of his breakfast there. Mountains of food, I tell you.
It was a foot-tall plate of chicken and waffles. That is more chicken and waffle than a person should have to eat.
It was
Thankfully,
insane.
it was a Bazag.
It was absolutely insane. But the convention as a whole, I just thought was fantastic. It was my very first one. Had never been to anything like that before. And everybody was great. The actors were great. Harlan Ellison was a fantastically entertaining panel, I have to say.
Peter Weller.
Peter Weller was the best, the absolute best panel. Peter Weller is a doctor of, what is it, art history?
Of Renaissance art, I believe, with a focus on Venetian.
Yeah. He had just earned his PhD, like, not long before the con, and he spent half of it talking about art history. And I'm like sitting here, it's like, God, I don't care about Star Trek anymore. I could listen to him talk about art history like the whole time.
Well,
They
It was
had art
fantastic.
history.
Yeah, it wasn't just art history; it was history in
And
general,
philosophy. Yeah. All
and
kinds.
and I have confirmed that he does speak Italian fluently. We found out that he speaks French fluently. He even learned American right. It was he is a true Renaissance man, and seriously, you could have a conversation with him probably for hours, and you might have trouble comprehending all of it, but it would still be one of the brightest experiences in your life.
Absolutely. I think it was actually I've been saying to people, one of my favorite experiences at the convention was actually being able to talk to some of the actors and have a conversation with them. Like the people who would set up at a table and sign autographs in the big vendors room. And, if there wasn't a line or anything, you could just walk right up to them and just start talking to them. I talked to Anthony Montgomery and Dominic Keating for a while, and that was great. They're both really cool. And some of them obviously, big huge line like Terry Farrell. You didn't have time to say like 2 words to her, but still, it was pretty cool. Got her autograph. Obviously, Cast here has a nice picture of himself with her in the wedding dress.
Why, yes, I do.
I am very envious of that. I should have gotten that ticket.
I honestly, we all figured that she at most would be in her standard duty uniform, science. That's all we figured on.
Yeah, and they did the makeup panel where he made her up into Dax, essentially, with the spots right on stage, right? Because I missed that part of it. I walked in at the end when they were just talking, and then she comes out in the wedding dress, which surprised everybody. The whole audience goes nuts. That was amazing.
Which, and I guess that's another thing too. Michael Westmore, the man has been working in the industry for many, many years, and just his willingness to answer questions, and then all of a sudden, like they say, your time's up for questions, and he's like, anybody who's got questions, come find me.
Well, I mean, honestly, Michael Westmore is one of the most awesome things about the TV show Face Off, because, his role in the TV show is you have the contestants who are starting working on whatever their assigned project is for that particular episode, and he wanders around, looks at things, and gives them advice on what to do and what not to do. In some episodes, he actually makes specific references to things he did on Star Trek, like explaining how he got the top of the Borg Queen's head to glow in certain specific locations and stuff like that.
I remember one thing that he said that I was there for that I thought would be a great thing to bring back to the podcast is he said that he drew a lot of his inspiration for the aliens of the week from like real life animals, reptiles and dinosaurs and things like that. And he figured that people would be able to relate to them a little bit better if there was something recognizable about them. So I thought, bring that back as maybe advice for all of us when we're making our alien species. Think about maybe something from the real world instead of just putting in a bunch of random things on the sliders or random pieces of the alien creator. Yeah,
that actually does sound a lot like what the advice that he often gives people on the Face Off show. He's like, I mean, he'll come up with something like, well, okay, so what is this supposed to represent? Then the person explains, and it's like, yeah, I don't see that. And then he explains, like, okay, if you change this or change that, then it'll look more like what your concept is you're going for. His basic thing that he says is that people need to be able to see at a glance the basic gist of what you're going for. They don't, if they have to like stare at it, it's generally ineffective.
I imagine in general it's a lot like what we do with our Foundry missions, that it's, there's all this tactical side and aspects we're trying to create, but at the end it's really about the feeling that is conveyed. Just that kind of like gut reaction.
And here's the other piece of advice that I wanted to bring back to people, to Foundry authors. One of the people that I met while I was there was, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher his last name, but Sean Tarango or something like that, who designed the Luna class. He was the one who won that competition for when they were making the Titan novels. And I had just a giant, long conversation with him all about the Luna class. He has a purpose and has really thought out every part of that design. I mean, that, you know, there's nothing on there that he did just because he thought it would look cool. And so I thought I'd bring that piece of advice back to everybody is, you know, when you're designing a map, because we don't really design ships, but we design maps. When you're designing a map, don't do things just because they look cool. Have a purpose behind, you know, such and such corridor, or, you know, have a purpose behind this pile of rocks over here. Why is that pile of rocks there? Does it need to be there? Is it there just to look cool, or does it have a purpose? You know, there's things to be thinking about. The player won't always ever pick up on those things, but it will still make your map designing much better.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying when I was discussing which of those exploration cluster maps that I would like to see imported into Foundry, is that ambiance is important. Even if the player doesn't consciously notice it, the simple fact that it's there makes the player feel better, or something along those lines.
It kind of, I always go back to like the behind the scenes stuff on Lord of the Rings, because the costume designers did so much minute detail on the costumes. I mean, you have like Gandalf's like undershirt has intricate embroidery. You never ever see it on screen, but it's there because the designers felt that it should be there, that that was integral to the character, even if you would never see it on screen.
That, and they didn't really know if it would actually be seen when they made the costumes.
Well,
so
there's that too.
They added it, and then, you know, if someone happens to see it later, great. If not, at least they don't need to worry about whether or not it's available.
Absolutely. But sometimes you never know what arcane portion of your map that you never thought anybody would ever see, somebody will actually see. Because if they're like Mark here and like to push the boundaries of maps.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of shooting to or design with the details in mind.
So let's see. There were a few other Foundry-related things that happened at the convention. First of all, Bazag got to get up and ask the devs a question. I don't remember what the actual question was that he asked. So essentially, I think it was, is there anything coming up in the Foundry that you're planning to do? Which they didn't really give an answer to that part, but they did. Their line was, we want to make it more accessible to more people, which that may just be, you know, PR speak, not answering the question. I mean, but if it is, then I applaud that sentiment.
Actually, Stephen Ricossa, who I should point out is the official schedule guy, said that there was a plan in the works.
Well, also, it's good to remember that this is dev time we're speaking of, and their intentions of how they are going to utilize dev time in the future, not so much a statement of what they are doing in the here and now.
And not set in stone in any way.
Yeah. But I mean, Steve Ricossa, and he kind of touched on this again in the after panel interview on Priority One. Mm-hmm. And basically what he said was that there is some plan in the works for the not too distant future.
Next Friday, AD?
I think he meant like after the new expansion, but not too far out. And I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say it's probably something along the lines of what Gecko's been going on about some sort of a Foundry rep system.
Well, either that or finally getting in those features from Neverwinter that they said they were working on however many 6 months ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Gecko's been in the last couple of interviews, Gecko's been making comments that basically until they can get more people playing the Foundry, they can't justify the development time to get more features into the editor. So I can't help but think that their plan is how are we going to get more people into the Foundry plan, and not how are we going to add more features.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and the egg sort of thing. How do we get more people into the Foundry? But then how do you get more Foundry into the people?
Yeah. So,
one thing that I think, well, this is from my point of view, obviously, not that of the devs, but from my point of view, the most important thing to improve the Foundry is, as many other people have mentioned several times, improve the search tool, because, you know, it's hard for people to get access to Foundry missions if the search tool doesn't let them, you know, actually search, except for, you know, things that they already know the name of.
So actually, I'm sorry. I actually wrote down what he said exactly in my notes, and basically he said that there is a plan in the not too distant future to make the Foundry much more immediately visible to the players. And you can interpret that how you want.
Yeah. I mean, visibility is something that we've talked about before. I mean, definitely with regards to putting in things like, you know, the town criers or whatever you want to call them, or, you know, Foundry in-game tutorials to put it in front of players a little bit. You know, maybe like an interface at certain Foundry doors that gives you a list of things that start at that door, things like that. I mean, visibility is important. And like that's like, you know, the line from the panel itself of, you know, putting more missions in front of more people. That is good. I think they need to fix the search user interface first. I think that has to happen before anything else has to happen. Or should happen.
I mean, I have no idea what they're going to come up with ultimately. I mean,
No.
Gecko clearly has his own ideas, but Gecko is not the sole authority.
No. That's definitely an important point to make. I mean, his is definitely a voice, I think, that is heard a lot when they're planning things, but it's not the only one.
Well, I think we think that because he's the voice that we tend to hear the most of.
He's visible.
So, I mean...
Because he does all the podcasts.
Yeah.
So everything gets laid at his feet.
But yeah, I don't think he has quite as much... I don't think he is as exclusive the voice as we tend to interpret it.
As always, there's just very little way for us to know everything that goes on there behind the scenes. And that's never going to change. So, the other fun Foundry-related things that happened at Star Trek Las Vegas is we actually met some Foundry players. During the Meet the Devs event, we met this guy. He looked about, oh God, like 75 or 80, something like that. And he saw our shirts, and he had played a lot of our missions, especially like RogueEnterprise's First Cause and Then Effect. He recognized that one, and so we spent some time talking to him. He was great to meet somebody who had played our missions, because of course we all took shirts that designed by Rogue Enterprise that had our Starbase UGC logo on the front and our mission lists and @handles on the back. So, I mean, that was the whole purpose of having those shirts, was to see if anybody would recognize us and recognize our mission lists. And then after that panel, while some of us, like Castmodean here, went off to other events, like, what was that? The Rat Pack was that night? Saturday night?
No, not the Rat Pack. It was the Enterprise Blues Band.
Enterprise Blues Band. Some of us went over to the deli and got a pizza, and we're eating our pizza, and Rogue Enterprise goes off for a drink. And he comes back with this young couple. They look 20-something-ish. And he said, hey, here's some people. They were looking at our shirts all night, and they wanted to come up and say that they've played our Foundry missions. And so we ended up talking to them for just hours and hours and hours, because they were a hoot. They fit right in with the group, and it was just fantastic. They had met over the internet and started playing Star Trek Online together because they lived in opposite areas, and that was their dates, was playing our Foundry missions. It's like, how cool is that?
And then they came on the forums to talk about it some more.
Yeah, they came on the forums. That was awesome. Let's see. The only other thing that I can think of Foundry related from Star Trek Las Vegas was that the G&T show was able to be playing a lot of our Foundry mission trailers. That was pretty awesome. So I imagine they probably had some questions from passersby as to what that was, and were able to explain what the deal was there. So, keep making those trailers. I think that was something that we did a lot in the early days of the Foundry, and maybe haven't done so much since then. But I know people are still doing it. It's still a great and fun thing to do, and so you never know. Sometimes you get an audience as big as Star Trek Las Vegas. So keep on making those trailers.
Yeah, and even with the bugs in the demo record, it is still a very powerful tool.
Yes. But of course, the main thing game related from Star Trek Las Vegas was, of course, Delta Rising. So let's talk about Delta Rising a little bit. I don't know. We've had some weeks to think about it. We've had a few dev blogs, not nearly as many as everybody wants, but
yeah, we got to get through the openers, and they're building up our appetite.
Yeah. Well, my thought on that is I assume they probably had a schedule of the blogs that they wanted to put out, and they're keeping to that schedule rather than changing it to answer the questions everybody wants answered really quickly.
Oh, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that even like Smirk or Trendy are not allowed to deviate from the release schedule.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure they're not.
Well, also there's the aspect of how much do Smirk and Trendy actually know that we.
I gotta assume that they know some more than we do. I mean, Brandon, Brandflakes, actually tweeted that he had known about it from before he left.
The number one question people on the forums keep asking is they want the devs to show them the stats of all the new T6 ships, and I don't think Trendy has that information.
No, I think they probably haven't submitted that yet. They're probably still tweaking it, and they haven't even put that part on Tribble yet. So I'm betting that they don't want to put that out until they have nailed down the stats, and they don't want to do that until they've tested it and put it out for testing.
Yeah, I mean,
so
that's another thing.
I'm betting, we might see some dev blogs just giving us the general gist of what T6 ships are going to be. And of course, the big thing on everybody's mind is, what's going to happen to T5 ships. And they've said that they're going to be upgradable so that they are competitive, but nobody knows what that means yet. And that's the big thing that everybody wants to know.
So the one argument on this I'm going to make is that Cryptic would not negate 90% of the C store because they would launch Tier 6 ships. Just keep that in mind.
Well, I'm not one of those people who's crying doom. I'm perfectly happy with a lot of my T5 ships, and I have not seen anything to make me concerned that I won't be able to still fly them.
Yeah. Because they know that a lot of people are attached to their Tier 5 ships or their perfect canon recreation of whatever was their favorite ship.
Mm-hmm. And of course, they have come out and specifically said that one ship will be upgradable to T6 specifically, which is the Jem'Hadar bug ship. So I have to gloat over Captain P.F. Dennis for just a little bit and say, ha ha ha, my bug ship will be T6.
Yeah,
he's a good sport. He'll take that as a joke.
My Chimera will take you on any day.
This is why I don't PvP, because I would probably I was terrible at it. So you would probably kick my butt.
That's okay. I'm not actually that good at PvP either.
We did get a look at some of the T6 ships. The Fed ships looked very interesting. That has not gotten a lot of positive feedback, as you might expect, because they don't look like your bog standard Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, my concern was that a lot of the staples of Federation ships, the things that easily identify as Federation, are kind of missing. That said, I can only see a faded image that someone took that only, I think, showed like a couple of angles, but yeah, it was really hard to...
They only showed like one angle of each ship, so
But,
it's
I
very
mean-
difficult to judge without really seeing them in game.
But yeah, I kind of felt I couldn't see the design progression with the new ships.
Yeah. And I think they kind of hinted that there was some sort of plot reason for them to look like they look.
Yeah. Which, I mean, may be the
Some
case.
sort
I mean,
of new technology that they needed to have to
I
go
mean-
where they're...
I totally bought the Dyson ships and the way they looked, even the Federation one, because they had a very specific reason for looking the way they did.
Yeah, basically they're they're integrating Salame tech into the ships.
Yeah. There were plot reasons. And I'm all about that. And in fact, I like it when the designers go away from what you might think of as standard Federation design, because, I mean, it's so easy to be stale when it comes to starship design.
Well, I mean, how
Especially
many
when you have
different
what
ways
goes
are
before.
there to take a ship, slap the saucer on it, and slap 2 nacelles on it? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
after a while, you end up with things where it doesn't really look new; it just looks slightly different.
Yeah.
Because that's actually, I mean, there's a lot of those things they put into some of the that you often see being passed around on the forum, where people are like, "Ooh, I want this ship. It's so pretty." Huh. Let's see here. That piece looks like it was copied off of a Sovereign. That piece looks like it's copied off a Galaxy. Then there's a few things where it looks like they just tweaked it a bit to make the pieces fit together. And you look at it and you're like, this doesn't strike me as anything new.
I still don't have my USS Nuclei.
Big asteroid ship.
Horda vessel.
Here, you need to make a Foundry mission about it.
We do have Horda in the Foundry now. The wheels are turning.
How to get the saucer to stick out of an asteroid?
That's easy. Just use one of the asset ships. 'Cause we have a couple of starships that are actually detail objects and not NPCs.
Yeah, that's true. There are some of those.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I don't think
They tend to be
you
things
can
like
those,
Mirandas
can you?
and Constitutions, I think. No,
Well,
I will
that's
say that a lot of people, and including myself, liked the Romulan and Klingon designs that they showed. I thought those were very cool looking. And in fact, I actually started 5 new characters because I want one of each class available to fly T6 ships. All the rest of my characters are in T5s that I want to stick with, so I'm continuing my insane alt-itis, and now I have 23 characters.
What? 23? Wow.
23. That's okay. I met a guy at Star Trek Las Vegas who had above 40, so I'm assuming he had 2 accounts or more. So
Nah, actually, I think
I'm not the
40 is
craziest
the
person.
maximum you can have on one account.
Yeah.
It should be 47.
47?
Just because.
Just cause, yeah.
Just 'cause it's
Hippie
an,
John,
it's-
our former host, is in the chat room laughing at me because I said I had 5 new characters. Yeah, laugh all you want. I'll be laughing all the way to the dilithium bank because it's so easy with a giant amount of characters to make dilithium. In any case, that was really about it from Star Trek Las Vegas. I don't know. General thoughts about the expansion. What do you guys think? Markhawkman, let's start with you.
Well, it's hard to say too much because, well, you know, we're on what? Devlog number 2? So,
I don't even know if we've got numbers yet.
I would call it 3 because we've had the initial announcement, the message from the EP, and the today's lore blogs, which I thought were very cool myself.
okay, well, yeah, whatever. Anyways, one thing that occurred to me is that the lore blog had something that was put in there that obviously was put in there as a sort of, I guess you could say, hey, look, this might be something important for you to pay attention to later thing. And it really made me wonder what the political situation of the Delta Quadrant is going to be like. Because there were several hints that the Vadwar had been going around and mucking things up in the Delta Quadrant.
They said
Because, you know, it's what the
mysterious
Vadwar do.
fleets or something like that.
Yeah.
Vadwar is one of the speculations.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason why people are speculating it's the Vadwar is that was the Vadwar's MO prior to being defeated, is that they had various methods of sneaking up on people that their enemies hadn't figured out how to counteract yet. And apparently the Vadwar thought that the Terai, the guys that were one of their biggest enemies, still hadn't figured it out by the time the Vadwar had been beaten. Instead, the Terai had, resorted to bombing the crud out of the Vadwar homeworld in an attempt to wipe out the Vadwar, and they still didn't actually understand how the Vadwar were doing things. Or at least that's what the one Vadwar guy claimed, anyway. But we don't really know. That wasn't really examined greatly. And if this particular season release or expansion or whatever deals with the whole thing with the Vadwar and Underspace, I will be extremely happy to play it.
I agree. I think that would be a very cool piece of story.
Yeah, I mean, because also the thing with the Vadwar and Underspace is that Underspace, whenever you're flying a ship through Underspace, you're moving at something like, well, they didn't actually say how much faster than in normal space, but a lot. I mean, it was almost like the difference between warp speed and impulse. I mean, the Vadwar were able to use Underspace to go like 100 light years in, well, not very long.
They're an old race too. They're from a long time ago. They were driven underground and were sleeping, in cryostasis. So I don't know what's their connection to the Iconians.
I was going to say, I mean, yeah, as an ancient race, there could be a connection there.
They got their butts kicked by the Terai in somewhere around the 1500s.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious of, if you remember way back when they did that poll about which Delta Quadrant bad guy would like to see, and of course,
remember which races were in the poll.
Yeah, the Krenim won.
The Krenim won. So are we going to see the Krenim?
Yeah, which actually were notably absent from the devlog, because the devlog talked about the Talaxians, the Okampa, the Kazon, a few races that were never mentioned in that poll.
Oh well, these are definitely. I mean, this is like only the first of what, 4 or 5.
Well,
so
I know.
Yeah, they definitely haven't mentioned every race that we're going to encounter,
and they're definitely building up.
Well, this is one of those things where people were trying to ponder the purpose of the poll, because a lot of the races that are that have been mentioned but not shown or didn't pop up in the poll were things that would, realistically speaking, be something that you might expect to be allied races. I mean, like that. I forget what that race's name was called. The ones where that reproduced by reanimating corpses. What were they called?
Is that the Vadwar?
The Kobali.
Kobali.
The Kobali, yes.
We know we're getting the Kobali, and in fact, they showed a screenshot. I think that's going to be their home world.
Well, or it could be the Krenim homeworld. It does
they said
archaeological Or
No, they specifically said, and I think maybe he couldn't quite remember the name of the thing when he was talking about it, but he said he showed a screenshot and he said this is a home world of a species that we've seen the species but not their home world before, and it was a species, and this was his words, that reproduced by essentially reanimating people's corpses, which of course is the Kobali. It was at the panel itself.
Anyways, the one of the things that people were speculating about that poll that they did a long time ago is that the purpose of the poll was to decide what races to add in that they hadn't made a choice on yet, and that races that they had already written into the story were left out of the poll intentionally because
that would be the
they
Voth.
had already made decisions regarding those, and that player feedback on whether or not players liked them was at that point in time irrelevant, because Cryptic had already decided these guys are going to be doing X, Y, or Z. Which gets us back to the whole thing with the Vadwars, that, the Vadwars seem like the sort of race that Cryptic may have decided that they were definitely going to be including for one of several reasons. Don't know this, but hey, also, another race that we didn't see in that poll was the Voth. You saw the Voth somewhere else, though.
Pretty sure because they were already working on Voth at the time.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, though, is that it's entirely possible that whichever race they were working on but didn't mention in that poll. Well, let me back up. Any races that they were already working on doing something with in the game were not mentioned in that poll, and the poll was strictly for races that they hadn't done anything with yet.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now,
but I'll tell you, one of the nice things for us Foundry authors is that the two things that, aside from the recent updates, which are sort of an unusual and awesome thing, the two things that were very regularly updated are ships and combat mobs. We always got the new combat mobs. We got the Alachi when Legacy Romulus came out. We got the Voth. Those things have always been updated. So I'm fairly confident that we'll see, the new races and new ships in the Foundry. If not at launch, then pretty soon after launch.
And with the Foundry, at least on Taco Fangs' radar, hopefully maybe we can get a few Foundry doors in the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah. That's one of the things that we don't really know about yet is will the Delta Quadrant be like sector space or not? We don't know yet. It'll be like a giant adventure zone?
Yeah, we don't know for sure.
I'm kind of leaning towards it'll be sector space, but
I think it will too.
I think that's just the logical way to do it. So let's see. General thoughts on the expansion. Greendragoon, go.
I'm excited. It's definitely going to be very nice to see a big story push. I am not too worried about whether the whole Tier 6 ship thing, just because, how many ways can they say they're going? It's definitely at the forefront of their minds. And as much as they might want to kind of incentivize people to seek after the new Tier 6 ships, I don't think they're going to want to invalidate all of the Tier 5 ships that they sell and in lock boxes and in all of the different ways that you can get them now. That just wouldn't make any sense for them. It wouldn't make any sense for us. So I think the Tier 6 ships will be different. They'll probably have something, I don't know, maybe along the lines of the Singularity Core, where the Singularity Core mixes things up, but it doesn't necessarily make the ships with Singularity Cores utterly superior. I'm kind of interested about the whole skill tree stuff that they mentioned, and what that's going to be.
It's an alternative advancement is what they called it.
They're definitely big
Or
into
as
those.
they've also phrased it on certain other occasions, lateral advancement. Although this doesn't really sound lateral. It sounds more like you're going to be gaining skills and abilities through methods other than leveling up, which means that they're probably not going to do anything along the lines of, say, adding an orbital strike 4 to the game. They're going to give you several new things that you can add skill points to that will not be the same as adding skill points to the existing character skills.
From what they've said, it sounds like they're going to be focusing more on specialization so that you can maybe ways to differentiate one engineer from another, so to say. All I know is I definitely need to get part 2 out before this thing goes live because I'm going to get jack squat done once it does.
Yeah, I say for at least a couple of months afterwards, we're gonna see, all of us Foundry authors are going to want to be playing the new content, and all the people who normally play our missions are also going to be wanting to play the new content. So don't look for a huge uptick in your reviews and plays during the months after an expansion.
Yeah.
Unless at some point they do a Foundry only expansion.
One could hope, but I doubt that.
I doubt that as well. All right, general thoughts on the expansion, Castmodean.
Doom?
All right, thank you, Castmodean.
I really don't know what to think right now because I don't have enough to really think with. We've seen... It's sort of like saying Perpetual is going to make an awesome Star Trek Online game based on all the stuff that Perpetual has shown. Because that's about all we've seen so far. It's...
Concept art.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of pretty pictures. I assume that there's a lot more than pretty pictures in existence, unlike Perpetual. But until we get something more concrete, it's a hazy possible thing. We have no idea if there's going to be a incremental advancement on the XP system, if it's going to be a scaled curve where, kind of like with the R&D system right now, where practically each level takes twice as much experience as the previous one.
Well, I mean, despite the fast speed with which you level up nowadays, there's already a curve on the experience system.
Well,
And-
to be fair, I have discovered that it is harder to level a character as a silver player than it is as a gold player, because there are boosts built in that, for some reason, level you all the way up like in no time.
Are you sure it's not the veteran? The veteran, because there's a couple of small XP boosts.
There's
that
a
come with
couple.
that.
There's a couple of veteran ones that come from that, but then I believe there's also a separate one just from having a gold standing. But regardless, you can level really quickly versus a regular silver player who it actually takes not quite twice as long, but there is a marked difference there. So we don't know anything about that. Skill trees. Didn't we have skill trees back in 2010?
We still do technically. Well, we got.
It was a different form of what we have now. You remember where you would used to put points in specific types of weapons, like...
yeah, it was just a variation.
I think it was a
retype.
variation of what we have. Ours is sort of a simplified version of what we used to have.
So is it going to be a reversion to sort of like that, or is it something
I
different?
don't know, that or something
My
like.
guess is it's actually going to be a separate thing that you level up, independent of your original skill tree. And I don't know, I had this idea a long time ago about specializations, where, say, if you're a science officer, you reach a certain point and you decide to be either a medical officer or an astrophysicist, and you go off and branch off in a completely different direction and get completely different skills, obviously still keeping the base skills of a science officer. So it may be something like that. That's my thought.
I'm probably still not going to get to have an archaeology major. But
It also reminds me of a comment that was made once long ago where someone was asking whether players would eventually gain the ability to use cross-specialization kit modules. And I forget whether it was Gecko or one of the other guys, but they basically said that it's a possibility, but if it was allowed, it'd be in some extremely limited fashion. I have to wonder if that might actually be part of the whole specialization thing. Is that maybe possibly this might give you some limited ability to use the abilities of other classes.
Well,
So
that would be interesting.
Make yourself like a tack leaning science or a science leaning engineer or something like that.
But you can only use, like, say, half the level of Mark that you would. So if you can use Mark 14 equipment on your science officer, you can only have a Mark 6 tactical module.
Well, or as another example, gain the ability to use orbital strike as a tactical officer, but you only get orbital strike 1 instead of orbital strike 3.
Yeah, I could see it that if there was limitation, and it could lead to some more interesting cross-pollination.
Sort of a hybridization of the class system. And it reminds me a little bit of the original Guild Wars, because in that game you picked a primary class and you picked a secondary class. You could change your secondary class anytime you wanted. But you got access to that class's skills and to their... You couldn't put any ability points towards those skills, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a little while since I played that game. And then I don't think you could get elite skills, the really powerful stuff, from that tree. But you could get some of the base skills and make very interesting builds out of that.
See, that's the one thing that's throwing me, because they made the comment about it being more or less you could keep going on forever in this system. There's like infinite progression, and so I don't know what that means. Whether it's just something like Mark suggests where you can pick whatever your secondary is, or if it's something else entirely.
Well, we don't know at this point, and really we don't, as Cass is saying, we don't know a lot.
Yeah.
Can only speculate. But that doesn't stop us, because we love speculating. We're MMO players. Speculating is what we do.
I thought it was raging in the forums impotently.
Well, everybody's got to have a hobby.
My hobby is observing the rage and writing replies and then hitting back on my browser before posting the reply.
I'm pretty sure you only do that most of the time. Sometimes you forget to hit back.
On occasion. So, let's see. Any more thoughts, Cast?
Probably, but I can't think of them right now.
All right.
Give me about 5 minutes after we stop recording.
Then you'll think of the perfect thing. Well, my overall impression of the expansion is a positive one so far. I mean, I like Voyager. It's not my favorite, but I like it. And I can't wait to see the story stuff that we come up with. I think that's fantastic. That it's going to have a lot of story focus. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be, regular PvE queue content, but there's also going to be a lot of story missions, I'm sure. And I as a philosophy, I have no problem with upping the level cap, upping the tiers of gear. I've been a veteran MMO player for a decade or more, and that's the reality. That's how things work. I've been through it plenty of times. It doesn't bother me one bit. So I'm excited to see all the ships and all that stuff, and I will be waiting eagerly to see the new devlogs as they come out and whatever hits Tribble as soon as it does. So, why don't we move it along to some more Foundry-related stuff? Let's see what we've been doing real briefly, because I think it probably will not take long to say what we've all been doing, because I've been doing nothing in the Foundry lately, other than testing the costumes on Tribble. Obviously, once that hits, I will be doing lots. But I haven't done anything else. Dragoon.
I have been compiling notes for part 2. I'm currently about halfway through the observation deck map, which has a lot of things that need to be rewritten. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of the slow progress of going through and combing through all my dialogue and making sure that everything works properly. Everything comes across the way I want. It's kind of tedious, but it needs to be done, and hopefully once I can get this out, I can kind of put it up properly for plays.
Sounds like you're getting very, very close.
I am. It's eating me up. I wish this portion was going faster.
I lost my little button that let me unmute things. So, Mark, what have you been working on?
I've been tinkering with Fractal Nebula. I've gotten far enough along in it to decide what I want to do for the random stupidity on the first ground map. It's just that I haven't put in the actual assets yet. I just decided in a vague sense what I wanted the random stupidity to be. Like for this one, depending on one of two blind choices that you make early on in the map, the characters that you meet will be either hostile or friendly. Or, well, with this being somewhat of a vague way of putting it, because they're not really going to attack you regardless of what you do, and they're not going to be particularly helpful either, because, you know, that actual mission has to come out more or less the same. Anyways, the options that I came up with involve having a small group of the FGC-47 life forms pop up as one of the semi-friendly groups that you see. I picked them because it amused me what you could do when you have a character that's represented by a visual effect on the actual map, but represented by an actual, you know, like face on when you're interacting with them. Because in this case, you would actually have a reason for that in the story, because the FGC-47 life forms have a somewhat limited ability to communicate with humans. When they're communicating with each other, they seem to employ some form of modulated energy pulses. And when they're communicating with humans, they have to take on the appearance of a human in order to talk. So if they're just off doing their own thing, you'll see this colored mass of energy moving around. And when they're talking to you, they need to, you know, like turn into a person temporarily. Honestly, I hadn't made a full list yet because I decided I wanted to have 8 different possible scenarios play out depending on what you do, but I'm probably only going to have 4 races show up, and because my decisions were, let's see here, hostile race or friendly race, energy-based race or flesh and blood race, and then there's a separate branch for, you know, what the race is actually there to do, which, like I said, I haven't finished thinking everything out yet. I just came up with the broad strokes so far. Oh, okay, next.
Definitely sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Cas-
it's my tinkering with pseudo randomness some more.
well, I definitely want to hear the results. Castmodean, what have you been working on?
Well, still been tinkering around. Apparently, I need to take the Kirkfat School of Exploration Mission Creation because I'm spending way too much time on this right now and probably need to cut back to like no time spent and get all the dilithium.
That is true. His mission, it took him like, what, 24 hours?
I
48
think he
hours?
said 6 hours of dedicated work.
6 hours of dedicated work, and it's his highest played mission, I think. Overall, his multi-month missions, like most of us create.
Which
Like
is
the Return
actually
to
kind
Terra
of
Nova,
surprising.
which
Oh yeah,
has that wonderful ziggurat in it that I still don't have the patience to recreate.
See, that's my problem. Is anything I sit down to make, I make way too complicated.
it's true. It becomes a point where it's like you can't make anything simple anymore.
But then other than that, I started laying down the foundation for a personal house. Because, yeah, we can do that now.
Actually, you know what? For that living quarters or whatever that category is, I'm actually thinking about making a recreation of my Beta Rana interior just for that, and leave out all of the triggers stuff.
Maybe I should do my
Because that
Ron
would-
Meal and Senate for that.
That would probably be a lot easier than doing a full rebuild of Beta Rana interior with all of the triggers and stuff in place.
Yeah, just import it into a new slot, delete everything you don't want, and you'll make sure it's hooked up so that it's exactly like you want it. Publish it with a new name. Won't have any reviews on it, and then I think and here's some advice for anybody who is going to build one of these quarters maps or RP maps. Get all of your friends, get all the people that you can find that are willing to do this, and go tag your mission as soon as it comes out with this quarters tag, so that it's got a bunch of them on there. Because you can't do it yourself. So, Cast, as soon as
We
you're
should
done,
probably do a thread on the forums for a list of those.
that's a good idea. All right, so let's see. We've got a couple of mission reviews. So, Markhawkman, whenever you're ready.
All right. Let's see here. What was the name of the first one again? I actually wrote down a longer than usual summary of things for this one. Okay, the first one is this mission called The Sacred Lie by LordLucavi. Okay, this is actually decidedly not an exploration mission. It's one of those things where Starfleet is going and enforcing one of the more obscure aspects of the Prime Directive, and they're sending you to do it. Which, in this case, involves figuring out who is messing with what is officially considered a pre-warp civilization. Because while they have developed spaceships and a limited ability to travel through space, not outside their solar system. Anyways, the basic gist of it is that, the Federation has a small, carefully disguised listening post in this system, and they've suddenly noticed that the people in that system are doing different things than they had been up until recently, and a variety of extremely strange things have been happening, and they don't understand the exact specifics of why. So they send you to investigate. Okay. It's a bit of a rough mission, so I made a pretty long list of suggestions and sent them to the author, and hopefully he'll fix those things. But anyways, he actually did a lot of very cool things in the mission, because the basic gist of it is that something like half of the mission is, well, you're actually physically there, but what you're seeing isn't real. So you kind of sort of end up fighting, you know, phantoms and psionic constructs that have no physical substance. I mean, the basic gist of it is that, you know, this race, I'm going to not bother explaining which race is doing this, just because that aspect of the mission actually is something that I found to be a reasonably good surprise twist when I played it, so I'm not going to spoil that for you guys. Anyway, so this race secretly built some sort of a psionic amplifier on the planet, and they were using it to cause people to see things that weren't there, and they were using this to manipulate the locals into doing what they wanted. Which, well, you know, that's why you're there. You actually end up with doing a reasonable amount of space combat and ground combat. But most of the ground combat is stuff that if you're really careful, you can avoid it. Although in some cases the story is written assuming you did the ground combat, even though you didn't really have to do the ground combat if you were as sneaky as I was. But anyways, he did a pretty good map for his temple compound for the locals. And it's actually, you know, one of those things where I looked at it and I actually saw things in what he did that I'd actually never seen before and I thought were really cool. Like taking one of those stone arch terrain props and using it as the doorway for a building complex. He did do a variety of things that didn't make a lot of sense, but, you know, they didn't really distract from the mission unless you were one of those people who explored the dark corners of the map that you're not really supposed to go on anyways, like me. Oh well.
You always have to be prepared for those people to play your mission, though.
Well, it didn't break the mission. It's just one of those things where when you look at the map from certain angles, you're like, oh, why did he bother doing that? Like in this one case, he has this wall that is literally on the edge of the walkable area of the map, far away from anything the player has a reason to look at. Because he actually went and did this thing where he did this walled compound. You beam inside one of the walls in the compound, and there's like kind of like almost like concentric rings of walls for the compound. One of them ends up going to the edge of the walkable area of the map, and then just kind of stopping at some random location. I'm not sure why he actually bothered building the outer wall, because it was just there for decoration. But, you know, it kind of gave you the impression that this was a somewhat fortified location, and the locals were doing something to protect it, even though you saw like 2 or 3 of them in the entire area. But anyways, he had a lot of really good uses for props. Like he carefully chose the objects he was going to use for various things. Like, I mean, I mentioned that whole thing with that doorway being made out of a stone arch. That was really cool. He also did pretty good use for patrols on the ground. I mean, because that was something that I noticed he did that was really cool. Because you have the few locals that you do see on the map will actually walk in these long pathways where they go up to the stone gate, then they go back and wander off to some other location. That was really nice. One of the things that he did that was kind of strange is that he would use a reach marker to have you move to an NPC location, and then you would have a talk to whatever marker to actually talk to the person, which the way he did it, it came out kind of redundant because, you know, you fly to the location, you trip the reach marker, and then you have to do the whole dialogue with contact thing. Instead of, you know, fly to the location, trip the reach marker, and then have a quest dialogue pop up instead of a dialogue with contacts. Oh well. It's one of those things that it's more of a minor inconvenience than anything else. It's not really what I would consider to be a problem. Anyways. But yeah, overall, I would say that the mission concept he had was very solid. Because he actually had a well thought out reason for a variety of things that, when you first see them, seem like random idiocy. Like, why is there a Tholian mob there? Why is there, you know, this other group of people over here when, you know, these two races aren't even in the story at all? But, you know, like I said, he actually had a reason for it, which, when you find out the exact reason, is actually pretty cool. And yeah, so yeah, I thought that it was a pretty good mission. A bit rough, but definitely worth a play. And let's see, other mission review. I played Order 3 by RogueEnterprise.
Who is in the chat room, by the way?
Yeah, Orders 3 by RogueEnterprise, which it was a interesting mission to be sure. You finally get to do your final confrontation with the rogue Mako operatives who have been wreaking havoc on this planet, yada yada yada, and then you end up in this, I guess you could say, philosophical debate over what who bore the bulk of the responsibility for the havoc that ensued between your conflict with the rogue Makos and, you know, what the rogue Makos were actually doing. Kind of interesting, actually, because, I mean, he did a whole lot of really, really cool map tricks, because he actually came up with a way of taking a single map and reusing it like 4 times for different things, and that had to have taken a whole lot of work to pull that one off. Very neat trick, to be sure. I won't spoil the ending, but the ending was one of the rare occasions where I'm in a Foundry map and I actually feel somewhat challenged. Then again, I also played this particular mission in a DSD, and, well, the Fed DSD has, shall we say, feeble hull. Oh well. Good mission. Very good mission. I liked it too.
Have you played the whole series?
Yes, actually I have.
So what did you think of the series as a whole?
It's definitely an interesting way of examining the whole. I'm not sure philosophical is necessarily the right word for it, but the reason why the Prime Directive exists, and the reason why enforcing the Prime Directive is as complicated as it is. I mean, because it's definitely an object lesson in how attempting to enforce the Prime Directive can go horribly wrong. And also, at the same time, an example of why the Prime Directive exists in the first place.
That sounds a little bit like an argument I was having with, I think it was Kirkfat, actually, at Star Trek Las Vegas, about Enterprise and Man of Steel, actually, is that, you know, these were sort of like examples of the reasons why the Prime Directive exists. The whole of Enterprise is that of Archer figuring out that, oh, all this time I've been interfering with these races. Maybe we shouldn't do that. That's a bad thing. Then that's why the Prime Directive comes to exist. The same way, Superman, spoilers, killing the bad guy at the end of the movie. That's why he doesn't kill anymore, because, it's the reason he figured out, I don't want to do this ever again. So, I mean, it's good to have examples of the reasons why these things exist, like the Prime Directive. That was a complete tangent, sorry.
Good tangent.
All right, well, we've got time for... Are you finished? I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Okay. We got time for a couple of topics or something. Mark, I think you had one that you wanted to bring up.
Yes. When is it a good thing to not explain what the heck is going on? Because one thing that occurred to me while people on the forums were discussing Lord of the Rings for some random reason is that in certain circumstances, not explaining something and leaving it to the reader or person playing your mission might actually make the story better in and of itself, rather than simply avoiding bogging the story down. Like one of the things that people have talked about with Tolkien's work is that there are certain aspects of his stories that he never explained. Like, the number one thing that has never been explained and probably never will be explained is the character of Tom Bombadil, who, well, let's face it, he seems to be the oldest living character in all of Tolkien's works, and Tolkien never explained why. I mean, because he literally seems
I have
older
a theory that Bombadil is Tolkien himself in his own.
So wait, does that make Tom Bombadil and Mary Sue?
Possibly. And Goldberry would be his own real life wife. But that's just my theory, personally. But you're right. I mean, he does not explain, I think, anyway, really what Tom Bombadil is. And so, I mean, relating that to...
There are actually several points...
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one. There are actually several points in his books where he kind of sort of obliquely hints at things that he never actually writes out in the stories, like the fact that not all of the creatures and beings that live in Arda, as he calls it, were actually put there by the creator or the people who are working for the creator. Some of them arrived there on their own.
Like
Is Tom
Ungoliant.
Bombadil one of them? Who knows? Because Tolkien never actually described any of these beings. He never specifically said that any character ever seen in the story is one of these beings. It's not something he talks about outside the Silmarillion. Oh well.
So relating that to Foundry missions, your question is, when is it good not to explain things? Well, I remember, I don't know, it's when you want to create a sense of mystery, I think, or it's when explaining it isn't necessarily integral to the story, and you figure that sometimes the player can pick up things on their own and figure things out.
So
there's two sides to that.
I think there's kind of two. I mean, obviously one of them is when you just don't need any more detail. It doesn't matter how it works. It's just that it works. But I mean, yeah, there's also the aspect. I was thinking of Alimax, the Mains of Balinar Moon, and just the whole mystery behind that one, and how he actually goes to great lengths to infer but not explain in that mission. And it just leaves a ton of it up to the player imagination. to kind of reach their own conclusions. And I think in that kind of situation, it can be a very powerful thing because it almost causes the player to fill in all of these blanks, and as a result, make the story incredibly or much more intimate.
It's that old principle from horror movies that the thing that you imagine is much more scarier than what they can show on screen.
Yeah.
Which is why a good horror movie won't show the monster for a long, long time.
But I mean, that applies to a ton of things. I mean, and going back to Tolkien, I mean, Tolkien had this very felt but not seen approach to the way magic is handled, just to the point where you're almost kind of left questioning whether or not it's really there or not. Because I mean, almost never does anyone do overt magic. It's always very feelings and subtlety, and so.
And often he describes it as something seemed to be there, or something appeared to happen, rather than stating outright that it happened.
Yeah, because I mean, it's one of those things that it's kind of like the Force. The Force was way better before they tried to explain it.
Yeah, that's a good. That is a very good example of, and it's something that he very wisely abandoned after the Phantom Menace.
But I mean, it's I know it's kind of trickier with Star Trek because Star Trek is a series built very heavily on exposition, and probably occasionally to its detriment. But at the same time, sometimes just leave it up to the imagination of the player to fill in the gaps of what's going on.
Well, one example of something that happened in Star Trek that has never been explained and probably never will be explained is Armus. Where the heck did that thing come from, and how did he become Armus? We get a few scattered bits of information about that, but apparently either the beings who did that and created Armus are still out there somewhere, or they grew old and died after they did whatever they did to Armus, and Armus is all that's left of them.
Or they went beyond the rim.
You never know. I mean, they could be the big baddie of season 11.
One of those things that, like I said, though, it's one of those things that the writers of the TV show left up to people's imaginations.
Another one is the quote God from Star Trek V. Never really explained what that thing is. Which is one of the reasons I created my Foundry mission Cold Winds, is because I wanted to kind of explain what that thing is, why it was there and why it was trapped there, and what exactly God needed with a starship.
Well, my pet hypothesis is that the God entity is from the same realm as Magus 2. Because one thing I noticed that was interesting there is that Magus 2 was also encountered in the core of the galaxy, not the same location as the God entity, but, in the center of the galaxy anyway.
And I think Bill Shatner did kind of talk on what his thoughts were on that being and what his intentions were at Las Vegas. Unfortunately, I was nowhere near that panel at the time.
I was flying back home, so I didn't get to see that panel. Maybe we will open that up to our fellows who were there, and
I saw him talk about it in Chicago.
What did he say?
He sounded confused, actually. I think he started out with some odd ideas, and then made a whole lot of compromises along the way. At least that's the way he puts it.
That sounds about right. But I think, as far as explaining things go in your mission, I think you want to be very intentional about when you give details to the player. And when you give exposition. I'm dealing with one right now where, essentially the whole thing is mystery. Is, what is this villain up to? And, you parcel out tidbits, and you have the player's bridge officers, through discussion, figure out some things and make some theories. and then finally at the very end, that's when you explain things.
See, overall, I have to lean towards you have to be very careful, and I'll have to use a movie analogy for this, and it's a subjective one, but the director's cut of Blade Runner is not as good as the original cut. The reason I say that is because they make some very overt inferences as to what one of the characters is and represents throughout the director's cut, where it's left very much up in the air in the original cut. And in many ways, it kind of ruins the director's cut because of the whole tone of the movie shifts just from that. So it's, do you want to make your mission something for many people or something very directly overt?
I suppose there's a time and a place for both. Just maybe not in Blade Runner. I don't know. I am not a fan of Blade Runner personally. I find it very difficult to sit through. And I generally like Ridley Scott movies, but just not that one.
I have tried to sit down through it several times and have never gotten very far. And
that's why I kept my statements as vague as I did, because there's always the slim chance that there are people who have not actually seen it. My recommendation would be to watch the original cut, not the theatrical, not the director's.
to flow a little bit better.
I thought so, but obviously it's not the director's full vision, and he felt he needed more exposition on things.
You know, it's a funny thing, and I'm just going to let us go on a complete tangent with this. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I had the extended version on DVD, and when I upgraded to Blu-ray, it was actually the theatrical version. But I didn't really mind because I kind of felt the stuff that they added in for the extended edition really was best left cut. It was like a lot of people explaining the obvious or adding in these extra details that really had no impact on the story. Yeah, great, it's Scotty's nephew that gets killed, but it doesn't really have any bearing on anything.
And why does he bring him to the bridge?
He could have just been attached to that particular cadet. I mean, they made a point of introducing him earlier on.
Because drama.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the same sort of logic, I think, as how in one of the movies they introduce I forget what her first name was, but she was like Hikaru Sulu's daughter or something.
Gamora.
Gamora.
Yeah, Gamora. I mean, honestly, those things that they did like that, I was kind of sort of thinking that the Roddenberry might have been kind of sort of hedging his bets on, maybe the original cast are going to retire or something, and I want to be able to keep going without them or something along those lines.
I don't think he was very involved at that point.
I was going to say, wasn't he already dead?
Oh, yeah. Actually, Star Trek 6 premiered.
Well,
So
but
he wasn't involved in that one.
We're talking about 1 through 5, though.
Yeah, well, you were talking about Gamora Sulu, which was in Generations.
Yeah.
Was? Oh.
Yes, and I always took the featuring of her as kind of another one of those implications that time has moved on, and you have Kirk, who's never settled down, never had a family. Mm-hmm. He's always been out in space, and that's
all a reflection of his state of mind at the time.
Where Sulu went and found a wife, husband, ?
Who knows?
Had a kid.
Yeah, because now that I think about it, that is actually kind of sort of the direction that conversation goes in, because Kirk's like, wait a second, how is it that you managed to find time to raise a family and I didn't? I mean,
and actually,
he didn't phrase it that way, but that's the gist of what he said.
as we're talking about explaining things, one of the great things about Demora Sulu is that you see her, and very little is explained about her other than that she's Sulu's daughter. And you see that, and you're like, huh, there's a story there about who she is, where she comes from, and how indeed did Sulu find time for a family, and, you know, what's that story? And so it's like, by not explaining it, they left you wanting more, and I think they actually made some novels, I think, around her.
There's at least 2 Sulu Excelsior ones, and actually a Lost Years one, like 2 months ago, actually features her because she does eventually take over command of the Enterprise B.
Ah.
So
Yeah,
did they
I actually
See?
like the Demora character.
did they
But
ever
that
explain
was-
how
right.
Harriman made captain? Managed to make captain?
Well, they have kind of in
Hey, I
some of
liked
the
him. Shut
novels. Harriman was never actually the official captain of the Enterprise. He's kind of like Robert April. He was the shakedown captain. He was in charge of the yard stuff. He was never meant to be the actual guy in the seat.
I thought Robert April was the captain for the first 5-year mission.
It depends on what you read. The implication from the animated series is that he was the yard captain and that he didn't really actually...
I know. I got a different impression from the animated series. That
Or I could
he had
have,
a full.
or I could have them backwards, and I could be thinking of one of the novels, because I've read a lot of the novels.
There was a bunch of stuff in the animated series about his wife being the chief medical officer and like pioneering a lot of the techniques that McCoy used.
And actually, as I think about it, I think I do have it backwards, and that was it. It kind of, there's a lot of vagueness there on that.
'Cause-
And
So a lot of vagueness and contradictions in soft canon.
Because that's where the 20 years came from. If you years 0 through 5 were Robert April, so years 5 through 10 were Christopher Pike, so 10 through 15 is Captain Kirk, and then the 15 to the 20 is the space in the movies between the end of the 5-year mission and her being slated her destruction in Search for Spock.
so sort of Decker, sort of Kirk, sort of Spock.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, that is all the time we have for today. So, Dragoon, why don't you toss up the contact info?
All right. If you guys want to email us, you can email us at foundryroundtable@live.com. I'll go poke Drogan, make sure he checks it. You can also find us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. You can contact Drogan at Droganteen1701. You can contact Markhawkman at MAR Hawkman. And you can contact me at Greendragoon.
And I just sort of float around at Starbase UGC.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Well,
Rumor
thank you
has it
everyone
he
for.
Sorry.
Rumor has it he what?
Oh, I was going to say, rumor has it he actually has a Castmodean account that he keeps tightly
Lies!
controlled.
It's all
Some say.
lies.
I don't think he ever uses it.
It is occasionally used, but I'm more likely to play a Foundry mission than I am to actually use it.
Oh, be careful where you say that, because we are the few people who have video evidence that you have played a Foundry mission.
Lies!
It is known.
Also, on a note, we have been releasing video playthroughs of some missions we played over the first Foundry weekend. You can check those out on YouTube. By the time this gets published properly, all 3 will be out, but currently, as of the time of this recording, there's 2 or 3 out, with the 3rd one coming out on Friday. Check those out. They're actually pretty fun.
Those were a lot of fun that day. We got together in a big group and ran a few Foundry missions.
Oh yeah, it was like,
something we intend to do again. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we will say good night.
good night.
Good night.
Doom?